points on that defense. I am not sold on the Broncos defense. They have looked good by playing bad teams. The Raiders, the Chargers, a depleted Ravens team on the opening game of the year in Denver. I'm not completely sold on the Broncos as the elite powerhouse that most people have made them out to be, but they're good enough to beat the Cowboys. Because let's face it, the NFC East is an embarrassment to pro football. I wish there was a way that we could preclude the NFC East from having a playoff representative this year. Ah, well, c'est la vie.
What it is what it is.
Texans 49ers. I thought this was going to be a good game. Then they traded their quarterback. I already had the 49ers winning in San Francisco, and now I'm just even more leaning towards them in this one. I'm even more convinced they're going to win. And I like TJ Yates. I think he's a solid quarterback, assuming they start TJ Yates. But I don't see him as a franchise quarterback. I see him as a game manager, which I know a lot of people hate the term. Deal with it, because that's what he is. He is not a guy who puts up 40-yard bombs or drives teams to fourth quarter winning touchdowns in under a minute with no timeouts left. He's the kind of guy who milks the clock, who does the dink and dunk passing. Occasionally he'll throw 115 out to Andre Johnson or DeAndre Hopkins. Or in this case, now Josh Gordon, now that they just traded their quarterback for him. But this is going to be the Arian Foster show, and against the 49ers, I don't think that's going to be enough. For the Sunday night game, we got the Chargers at the Raiders. I got the Chargers. Who knows if Terrell Pryor is going to play. Obviously, Matt Flynn is not nearly as good as people thought he was in Green Bay because he's been to two different teams and lost the starting job in both accounts. And Phillip Rivers is playing the best football of his career. I don't think it'll last, but it'll last long enough for a win against the Raiders. So we got the Chargers. And in the Monday Nighter, Falcons redeem themselves from that Patriots fiasco and win at home against the Jets. Because I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'm going to say it all season long. I don't like the Jets. I don't trust them. I don't like Geno Smith. I don't like Rex Ryan. I don't like that defense without Darrelle Revis. I don't like their running game. I think they are a mediocre team that had a couple of fluky wins against mediocre teams. They are going to have an awful season, and they're going to show it once again by losing to the Falcons in Atlanta, even though the Falcons are playing poorly and are depleted. And that is my Week 5 picks. Sticking with football, we're going to move on to the Fantasy 5. All right, as we know, the Fantasy 5 is 5 sit-ems, 5 stardoms. We all have our superstars that we're not going to change for anything, so we're not going to talk about those. We won't be saying, ooh, start Aaron Rodgers. Everybody knows to start Aaron Rodgers. So we're doing 5 you should start, 5 you should sit, of guys you might not otherwise consider. And if you've got some sleepers in there that you want to tell me about, tweet me at the CSBS or give me a call, 630-534-0779. First of all, we're going to sit Chris Johnson. The Chiefs are a great run defensive team. They're a great defensive team, period. They're very good against the run. And Chris Johnson's been having a good year. I don't think anybody's regretted picking him up, especially since you can get him in some pretty late rounds. However, I think he's going to be stifled this week. So if you've got a viable backup in your league, I'd play the backup and maybe just sit Chris Johnson this week. I don't think he's going to do much against that Kansas City Chiefs, even though he's in Tennessee. Oh, quick update before we get to the rest of the 5. On Twitter, it's just been announced by ProFootballTalk.com that Rashad Jennings is going to get a lot of carries in place of Darren McFadden for the Raiders. Darren McFadden has been hampered by injuries again, and Rashad Jennings is going to be expected to carry the bulk of the carries. So if you've got a Darren McFadden in your league, you might want to find another alternative because that was just raised on Twitter, ProFootballTalk.com. All right, back to the 5 sit-em stardoms. So, we're going to sit Chris Johnson. Who are we going to start? We're going to start Trent Richardson. Yeah, he just got traded. Yes, he hasn't done much this year. However, we talked about the Seahawks not being a good run defensive team. And with Ahmad Bradshaw out with a neck injury, They have nowhere else to turn but to the new guy, Trent Richardson. Plus, they didn't trade a first-round pick for nothing. They got him to start him, and he's going to have a big game against the Seahawks. So start him. You know who else you should start? Jermaine Gresham, the tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're playing the Patriots. They're at home. And you know what the Patriots don't have? A good defense. They have one good cornerback, and Aqib Talib. Aqib Talib will probably be able to do a pretty good job on A.J. Green. What's that going to open up? It's going to open up the seam routes for the tight ends, Tyler Eifert and Jermaine Gresham. Gresham is the number one tight end. He's a 2 or 3 time Pro Bowler the past few years. I expect him to have a big game, especially now that Vince Wilfork is out for the Patriots. That defense isn't stopping anybody on a consistent basis, so start Gresham. And at tight end, who are we going to sit? Vernon Davis of the 49ers. Yeah, the 49ers are probably going to steamroll the Texans, but the Texans have a very good linebacker unit. They have a unit that can rush the passer. They have a unit that can cover receivers, running backs, tight ends. So you know what? Anquan Bolden might be able to get open. Frank Gore might be able to make some noise. I don't expect Vernon Davis to be able to do the same. So let's sit Vernon Davis if you've got a viable second tight end option. At quarterback, sit Joe Flacco. You don't want him going against a pissed-off Dolphins team in South Beach. And you know why? Because the Dolphins are a good team. And Joe Flacco is not Drew Brees. Okay? He is not going to be marching his team up and down with Torrey Smith against what was a top 5 defense in the NFL, especially a team that's at home coming off a very poor outing on national TV on Monday Night Football. So you're going to sit Joe Flacco, and you're going to start Tony Romo. Tony Romo was picked up late in a lot of leagues this year, and it's not that unreasonable given his inconsistency, but he's having a good year. He's got 8 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's throwing for a lot of yardage, and he's going against the Broncos. We talked about earlier, I am not sold on the Broncos being an elite team. The Broncos will win, but Tony Romo will put up points against that defense. So I'm starting Tony Romo this week against the Broncos in place of Joe Flacco. At receiver, who are we going to sit? We're going to sit Marcus Colston of the Saints because the Bears have 2 Pro Bowl corners, Charles Peanut Tillman and Tim Jennings. Tim Jennings last year led the league in interceptions. Peanut Tillman leads the galaxy in forced fumbles. If Colston even gets to catch a ball, he's probably going to turn it over via fumble, or Drew Brees is going to get jumped by Tim Jennings. Drew Brees can spread the ball around. He does not need to hit Colston to have a good game. And why is he going to risk forcing it in against a Pro Bowl cornerback when he can get it to Sproles, when he can get it to Jimmy Graham, when he can get it to any other target that he has on that team? I'm staying away from Colston going against an opportunistic Bears defense. And in his place, Justin Blackmon. We talked about him. He is back. After 4-week suspension, he is coming back to play the Rams. The Rams' defense has been very shoddy and very inconsistent, and he is an elite-level receiver in the NFL. And they're saying he's coming back in the best shape of his career. Even with Blaine Gabbert or Chad Henne, I don't care. He's going to get some catches. He might even get a touchdown because he's a big target with great hands. So we're starting Justin Blackmon. And that leaves the defenses. Who we're starting? Miami. We just talked about this. Flacco's not going up and down against that defense, and I like to start home defenses because home defenses usually get amped up with the crowd. Crowd noise gets inside the offensive ear. It's harder for the teams to drive down. Who we're going against? Arizona. Yeah, they're a home defense this week, but they're going against the Panthers. Cam Newton puts up stats. He puts up points. The Cardinals turn the ball over. I don't like where they're sitting, even with Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu in that backfield. I don't like the matchup. I think the Panthers are just going to run all over that team with D'Angelo Williams and Cam Newton. I think Steve Smith might even break 1 or 2 for long gains. So stay away from Arizona. Start Miami. You'll thank me later. And that has been the Fantasy 5. Sit 'em, start 'em. As I said, if you've got any sleepers you want to know about or any questions about any potential matchups, let me know. Tweet me at the CSBS. Call me, 630-534-0779. I've got a few other news items before we get to For the Love of the Game later on. First thing I want to talk about is this Chargers-Raiders game coming up this week on Sunday Night Football. Because of the AL playoffs, specifically the Tigers and the Oakland A's, the game got moved back. Now, I understand that, but Wouldn't it have been better to maybe just put them on Monday Night Football instead? Because apparently it takes 24 hours to convert the Oakland A Stadium from a baseball field to a football stadium. So what we've got here are a time compression in which both teams need to use the field, but the grounds crew doesn't have enough time to convert the field over for the usage. So we have the A's hosting the Tigers on Saturday Night Baseball, and then we've got the Chargers playing the Raiders at night. And the start time for that game has been moved to 11:35 Eastern. That's right, the game doesn't start until 11:35 Eastern Time. So if you're like me from the Chicagoland area and you feel like watching Sunday Night Football, you have to wait till 10:30 at night. You know what? I get up at 5 in the morning for work. I am not starting a football game at 10:30, especially the Chargers and the Raiders. NBC has got to be furious because you know what? This is going to hurt their ratings. They're going to be losing major markets. You think New York and Chicago are going to be watching Sunday Night Football right now? Not a chance. And who do they get in their place? Oh, you might get Oakland and San Diego to watch that game. Maybe. If I'm in Oakland, I'm not watching too much Raiders. They're a fickle fan base other than those psychos in the black hole. And San Diego? They barely supported their team when they were good, let alone when they're just a middle-of-the-pack team. So, my apologies to NBC, but that is a brutal move for a Sunday night football game. What I don't understand, though, is why did we not shift? If you shift it, if you're going to shift it, you can either put the Chargers on Monday Night Football, flip that out, and put the Monday night game, which was Jets-Falcons, put them on Sunday night. Or the baseball games. Why don't we make the A's and Tigers game the earlier game and make the other game the night game? That way, there's enough time to convert the field over, and the Chargers can start on time. It makes no sense to me, and if you have an understanding of what this is about and why they don't do something that common sense, please call me, 630-534-0779, because your guess is as good as mine. So, to the NFL.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
But it is what it is. There was an interesting conversation this past week on Mike and Mike in the Morning. If you're like me, and I'm guessing you are, because if you're listening to my show, you're listening to an internet radio sports show, and I'm guessing you probably listen to some national radio shows as well. Mike and Mike in the Morning had an interesting debate about the use of the word we in sports. You know, when, as a fan of the Bears, I might say, oh, we are playing the Lions last week, or we are going to play the Saints this week. You know, we, as if a member of the team. Mike Golick and Mike Greenberg from Mike and Mike always had a debate about this. Golick says that as fans, we should not. We have no impact on the game. Whether that's a valid argument or not, I'm not getting into that. I'm just talking about this debate. Greenberg says, as a fan ever since he was a child, him specifically of the New York Jets, that he has every right to say we. He pays for season tickets. He pays for the merchandise. He goes out of his way to watch every game, thus making him a part of the New York Jet family. Well, this past week, the Cleveland Indians made the wild card, and Golick kept referring to them as we, because he is a Cleveland fan. So we made the playoffs. We are going to play the Tampa Bay Rays. We. And man, did he face a firestorm on Twitter. I mean, every fan who listens to Mike and Mike in the Morning, calling him a hypocrite, calling him this and that, and just saying, how can you do this? And, of course, Greenberg didn't take the high road. He was needling him. He was poking him. He was calling him out for the mere fact that he kept using we. And here's Golick's response. Golick said, since I was a former player, I can say we. But you're a former football player. Doesn't matter. When you're a professional athlete, it's a fraternity of brothers. I'm sorry, that's a bunch of horse crap. And excuse my language. But, you know, that fraternity of players is a crock. It's no more of a fraternity from a professional baseball player and a professional football player than it is from season ticket holders or the diehard fans who actually get to meet the players. I am betting Golick has not met a single person, except for maybe the manager, Terry Francona, but not a single player on that Indians team. He's a generation removed. He hasn't played professionally in years. And he didn't even play in Cleveland. So, for him to say we in regards to Cleveland, but saying that any other person who was not a